Dr. O'Brien, welcome back to the podcast. It's really nice to connect again.
Oh, thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be with you.
So you've been on the podcast previously, and we've talked primarily around gut health. We've talked about leaky guts. That obviously brought in a bit of a conversation around inflammation as well. But today we're going to be taking a bit of a deeper dive into inflammation. Before we do so, 99.9% of our listeners, I'm sure, very much know who you are. But are you happy just to do a very quick intro into your background for those that might not have come across your work yet?
Of course, very brief. Uh, um, let's see. It was 44 years ago that my ex and I were unable to get pregnant. And I was an intern at the time, and I called the 7 most famous holistic doctors I'd ever heard of and asked, what do you do for infertility? They all told me what they do, and I put a program together, and we were pregnant in 6 weeks.
Wow.
My neighbors in married housing had been, we lived on campus, and our neighbors had been through artificial insemination and nothing had worked. And they'd asked if I'd work with them. And I said, well, I don't really know what I'm doing, but I don't think it's going to hurt you. They were pregnant in 3 months. So now we're 4 months pregnant, just so happy, telling all of our friends. And we were in Chicago, school was in Chicago, and our friend's sister had had 3 miscarriages and said, my sister really wants to talk to you. Can she come talk to you, please, please? And okay, and so people started coming, and I was talking to and treating people out of my dormitory room. You're not supposed to do that, but I was. And so we came out into practice, really hot to trot to help the world with hormone-related problems and infertility. And there's not much in medicine that's all or every, but this was every in my clinical experience. Every couple that had hormone-related problems, whether it was infertility or recurrent miscarriages or fibrocystic breasts or premature ejaculation, it didn't matter. Low sperm count, it didn't matter what the problem was. Every single one of them had as a component of what was contributing to their problem, they were eating foods that they did not know were a problem for them, because they did not feel bad when they ate the food. But the food was causing inflammation in their body. And if you pull at a chain, the chain always breaks at the weakest link, always. It'll be at one end, the middle, the other end is your heart, your brain, your liver, your kidneys, wherever your weak link is. And when you're eating foods that your immune system is fighting, and it doesn't matter that you don't feel bad when you ate the food. I mean, the ratio is 8-to-1. For every one person that has gut symptoms with a food that their immune system is fighting, there are 8 people that don't have gut symptoms. They've got brain symptoms or skin symptoms or joint symptoms or detox symptoms. They don't have gut symptoms. So they eat the food and they think they're fine, but it's activating the immune system, creating inflammation that's pulling at the chain of wherever their weak link is. And so we came out into practice with that realization. And from day one, we've been doing functional medicine. That's been 44 years now. Long before it was called functional medicine, actually.
Yeah, I was going to say.
And then Dr. Bland came up with the term. I was in Dr. Jeff Bland's first talk in Chicago in 1978. So I understood this concept of looking for the bigger picture. Didn't know how to do it, but I understood that that was the goal. And now we've come to the point to where we really understand that it's this low-grade inflammation under the surface. And while you feel okay, that's killing off cells, killing off cells, killing off cells. And eventually you start getting symptoms because you've killed off enough cells wherever the weak link is in your chain. Let's say it's your thyroid. So now eventually, with enough thyroid damage, you get cold hands and feet. It's hard to wake up in the morning. You wish you had 20 more minutes in bed. Your energy is not what it should be. You can't lose that last 5 pounds, even if you don't eat for a couple days. your system's sluggish and slow. You may have a little depression, all possible thyroid symptoms, but you eventually start getting some symptoms and they stick around and they get worse and worse. And finally you go to a doctor. And if it's a really good doctor, you get a diagnosis. You have a thyroid problem. We'll give you thyroid hormone. Well, the problem is not a deficiency of the hormone. The problem is the inflammation that's killing off thyroid cells, killing off thyroid cells, killing off thyroid cells, or joint cells for rheumatoid arthritis, or myelin cells, the saran wrap around your nerves for multiple sclerosis, or brain cells for cognitive decline and memory loss and Alzheimer's and Parkinson's. It doesn't matter what the symptoms are. This mechanism is the underlying mechanism for all chronic disease.
Thank you. I appreciate you entertaining my question around a little bit of your background. I know most people are aware of you, but it's nice to hear people's stories and what got them into this work as well, because I think that connects people to what we're about to talk about, which is what you've touched on already, inflammation. So I guess after 40 odd years of experience and obviously all the research starting to come out around sort of inflammation, silent inflammation, and all these concepts, where would you like to take today's story, Dr. O'Brien?
Well, perhaps it's because of my age. One of my goals, actually, we have a 3-year-old boy, and I'm 72. And one of my goals is to shake it up on the dance floor at his wedding, which will be in 25 years or 30 years, so I need to keep my body functional so that I can do that, right? So one of my goals is quality of life for people, for myself, and in our work. How do you maintain a high quality of life in terms of body function and brain function? How do you do that? And the premise is base hits win the ball game. In the game of baseball, everybody wants a home run. Everybody wants to hit the ball out of the park, but that's not what wins games. What wins games is when every player gets a little hit and gets on base, and another little hit and gets on base, and another little hit and gets on base. That's how you win ball games. Sometimes the home run is, dramatic and we cheer and all of that. But it's all the little things you do. And the only way to be successful, in my experience now with our patients, the only way our patients are successful in changing the direction of their health is if they embrace a particular way of thinking. And that particular way of thinking is that, I'll say this, it's all the little things you do on a consistent basis that accumulatively, and now this is the language of the researchers, arrests the development of chronic inflammatory disease. The Center for Disease Control tells us that 14 of the 15 top causes of death are chronic inflammatory diseases. It's always inflammation, pulling on the chain. It's always inflammation, except for unintentional injuries. Everything else is inflammation under the surface for years that you don't feel. And that's the problem. If you don't feel it, you don't put attention on it. And our goal is to bring this to your attention so that you understand, oh, my son's attention deficit. Could that be from inflammation? It's always from inflammation, without exception. Oh, my husband's high cholesterol. Could that be from inflammation? It's always inflammation. Oh, my hormone imbalances. Could that be from It's always inflammation. Do you get my point? It's always inflammation under the surface that we don't think about. And when you start thinking about this, then you start asking the question, so wait a minute. So inflammation is the immune system being activated to create this inflammation. Well, why would it do that? Well, Mrs. Patient, your immune system is the armed forces in your body. It's the Army, the Navy, the Marines, the Air Force. It's the armed forces there to protect you. We call them IgA, IgG, IgE, IgM, cytokines. They're all different branches of the armed forces there to protect you. So when you have this inflammation going on, the million-dollar question is, what is your immune system trying to protect you from? And when you identify what your immune system is trying to protect you from, we call that the triggers. When you identify the triggers that are activating your immune system and you reduce your exposure to those triggers, the result is the inflammation goes down, you stop pulling on the chain so hard, and the symptoms that you were starting to develop, you arrest them. You arrest the development of chronic disease when you reduce the inflammation. And the way you reduce the inflammation is not by taking some medication, some non-steroidal anti-inflammatory medication, or by taking steroids. Now, there are times when you need to take steroids, you need to take the medicine for a short period of time so you can function, but you have to stop throwing petrol on the fire if you want to reduce the inflammation. So you have to identify, where is the inflammation coming from? What are my exposures that are creating that? Is my son's seizures because he has accumulated lead in his body and in his brain, or mercury? Or is it chemicals that have accumulated in the body? Or is it bad air? You know, every child that they check in Mexico City, every child has the evidence of the mechanisms that eventually causes Alzheimer's. Every single one. Because of the 5 types of Alzheimer's, 60 to 65% of Alzheimer's is called inhalation Alzheimer's. It's what you're breathing that goes straight up to your brain, causing the inflammation in your brain. Well, Mexico City, the air pollution is so bad that these kids are breathing that air all the time, right? So you have to ask the question, how am I throwing petrol on the fire? And then once you identify it, you begin reducing your exposures to those triggers of inflammation. The result is the inflammation starts to come down, the pull on the chain comes down, and your son's seizures stop. Let me give you an example. In the Journal of Gastroenterology, they published a paper that children with drug-resistant epilepsy, that means the child has been given at least 3 different medications that don't work and is still having seizures. 50% of children with drug-resistant epilepsy go into complete remission, the seizures stop, on a gluten-free diet. 50%. Well, why didn't my neurologist tell us about that? Because neurologists don't read gastroenterology journals. They read neurology journals. They just don't know. But in that example, the petrol on the fire is wheat, is gluten. Take the gluten out, the seizures stop. And you look like a miracle doctor because you just told the patient, stop throwing petrol on the fire. You know, I make it sound simple, and in some ways it is. You know, it's a complicated, because there are so many different ways that we throw petrol on the fire. But if you identify the major ones, and this is where I was going with all of this, the key to success, as I said, base hits win the ball game. It's what we recommend to our patients because it's overwhelming when you hear all of this information, completely overwhelming. But this is what you do. You allocate 1 hour a week. You tell your family every Tuesday night after dinner, or every Sunday after services, whenever it is, but don't bother me. I'm going to spend 1 hour and I'm going to learn more how we can be healthier as a family. And when you go back, because you remembered I talked about when you leave leftover food in a plastic storage container in the refrigerator, the next day the food has phthalates, chemicals used to mold plastic. And these phthalates disrupt the hormones in your body. But you're eating the chicken, leftover chicken, but it's got phthalates in it. And when you remember, oh, wait, and you go back to my book, or if you watch our docuseries, and you look at the 3 URLs for glass storage containers, and you go to mileskimball.com, amazon.com, and whatever the third one was, I don't remember. And you say, oh, those are okay. Oh, I like those. Those are really nice. And you order 3 round ones and 2 square ones and 1 for the pie, and you pay with your credit card, hit send. You're done for the week. It took you an hour to do that. But now the glass storage containers will come, and never again do you poison your family with small amounts of poison that accumulate in the body over time. And then next week, Tuesday night after dinner, don't bother me. And you remember we talked about the phthalates in nail polish that are in your bloodstream in 4 to 5 minutes. It's what makes nails polish hard, the phthalates. But there's just minute amounts. There's not enough to be toxic to people, but this stuff accumulates in your body. And so you go to the 3 URLs for organic nail polish, and you order and you pay with the credit card, and you hit send, you're done. It took an hour, but you're done for the week. And then next week, you remember we talked about indoor air pollution is worse than outdoor air pollution. And you download the handout from NASA on houseplants and how 2 6-inch houseplants in a 10 by 10 room absorb 74% of the toxins in the air. So you go out and you buy a bunch of little houseplants, and you've got the pictures from the handout of what the plants, oh, I've seen those before. And you get them and you put them in your children's bedrooms because they clean the air. And then next week, you do something else. And then next week, you do 1 hour a week. And in 6 months, you've completely changed the environment for you and your family. That's what we're talking about in the inflammation equation. All of this overwhelming information that you need to know basics of it so you can apply some action steps 1 hour a week. And in 6 months, your husband's cholesterol is down to normal. You've lost that extra weight that you couldn't get rid of from your midsection. You're down 2 dress sizes. Your teachers are saying that your son's teachers are saying the new medication you're giving him is really working. He's really good in school. And you say, we just changed his diet. And the teacher says, oh, I've heard about that before. And you see all of these benefits start to accrue for you because you're allocating 1 hour a week. Now you have to be willing to sit with overwhelm. You have to be willing to sit there and say, oh my God, I can't remember this and I can't remember, oh my God, there's so much and there's so much. You have to be willing to sit there with that. And you've all heard the term, don't throw the baby out with the bathwater, right? Just be okay to be overwhelmed and just allocate 1 hour a week. And we will show you how to completely change the direction of the health for you and your family.
Brilliant. Thank you, Dr. Ryan. I think you mentioned a few things there around phthalates and other compounds in plastics and things in our air. One sort of thought that just came to mind. Are you happy to share some examples of things that we might want to consider adding into the mix? I'm just thinking that of things like how the microbiome has a big modulatory role to play in our immune system. So it might be nice just to give people a sense of, you've given some examples of what we definitely need to get out of our environment. What might we want to add?
Excellent question. Thank you so much. Just before our interview, I was reviewing episode 3, which is all about the microbiome. And it's so exciting to hear these world-class experts talking about this. And I had to laugh while I was watching it because I kept interrupting them. I said, excuse me, professor. And he looks at me. I say, did you just say, well, yes. Well, does that mean, well, yes. So then that would mean that a person could, yes, exactly. So I kept interrupting them because they're geeks and they talk in science language that people don't know what those words mean. So you're going to be overwhelmed by words sometimes, right? But you're going to learn that, oh, so that's what that means. Okay, fine. And on the microbiome, I guess I would say it this way. Professor Alessio Fasano is professor of medicine, Harvard Medical School, professor of nutrition, Harvard School of Public Health, the chief of pediatric gastroenterology at Mass General at Harvard, the director of mucosal immunology, that's the lining of your gut, the lining of your lungs, the lining of your brain at Harvard, the director of the Celiac Research Center at Harvard. 5 titles. Any one title is a lifelong goal for someone at the top of their game. He's got 5. We think he's going to win the Nobel Prize because he and his team are the ones that identified the mechanism by which this thing, leaky gut, occurs. And they did that in 1997, and they've been writing about it for 25 years now. Mm-hmm. So Professor Fasano is always so careful about what he says, so careful, so he's not misquoted, right? And you see a paper, a research paper, and there'll be 8 authors on the research paper. The last one, Alessio Fasano, he signed off on it, right? This paper he wrote himself, no other authors, to give you an appreciation for how important the message is that he wants to give to the world. He wrote the paper himself. The title of the paper, All Disease Begins in the, quote, leaky gut, the role of the protein zonulin in the development of chronic inflammatory disease. Now, 14 of the 15 top causes of death are chronic inflammatory diseases. Now, wait a minute. Fasano says all disease begins in the leaky gut. The role of zonulin in the development of chronic inflammatory disease. Wow, so this gut thing must be really important, huh? All disease begins there. Well, what about MS? All disease begins in the leaky. Well, what about my son's seizures? All disease begins in the leaky. Well, what about my depression that I'm on antidepressants for? All disease begins in the leaky. Do you get the message? All disease begins in the leaky gut, which means you always have to address the gut and the microbiome of the gut with any health concern that you have, any chronic health concern. So we talk about how do you rebuild a healthy, diverse microbiome? Such a critically important concept of the having more good guys in your gut than bad guys. Critically important, because all disease begins in the leaky gut. And the leaky gut comes when you have too many bad guys in the gut and not enough good guys. Too many bad guys in the gut creates the inflammation in the gut that causes the leaky gut. And to stop the leaky gut, all disease begins in the leaky gut. To stop that, you have to change the environment of the microbiome. So we talk about eat root vegetables every day, 1 or 2 root vegetables a day. Radishes, sweet potatoes, tubers, I'm going blank on some of the root vegetables, turnips, parsnips, rutabaga. Every root vegetable feeds different families of good bacteria in your gut. They don't feed bad bacteria. They feed good bacteria in your gut. And every root vegetable feeds different families. And you want all of the families of good bacteria. So you include in your diet every day 1 or 2 root vegetables. And most of us have been to a kind of fancy restaurant where they take radishes and they shave them really thin and they're raw on a salad. You know, you can eat raw radishes, you know, a little bit. They're not that bitter when they're in a salad or something. And you can cook, you can bake sweet potatoes. You can make French fries in the oven so they're not soaking in bad fats, right? And there's so many recipes, and we give you recipes for all that. But the first thing in building a healthy, diverse microbiome is to eat 1 or 2 root vegetables every day, you and your family. Next, you go on Google and you type in list of prebiotic foods. And you print out the list and you put it on your refrigerator. And you'll find that an onion is a prebiotic. Prebiotics feed the good bacteria, the probiotics, in your gut. So you always want to feed the good guys in your gut. An onion is a prebiotic. Garlic is a prebiotic. Banana is a prebiotic. There are many, many prebiotics. So you print the list out, including root vegetables, they're a prebiotic. You print the list out, and every day you have 1 or 2 root vegetables and 2 from the list. Every day, it becomes part of your lifestyle. So now you're feeding, encouraging more of the good guys in your gut, so they can become dominant and take over from the bad guys, get rid of the bad guys. Next, Mrs. Patient, you get 5 different types of fermented vegetables. Get sauerkraut, kimchi, miso, fermented beets, curry flavored, whatever you like, fermented vegetables, because the fermentation process creates the good bacteria, and you eat a tablespoon a day of fermented vegetables, and you're inoculating your gut with more of the families of good bacteria. Some you may have already, some you may be low on. It doesn't matter. And you don't eat sauerkraut every day. I mean, it's good for you, but you alternate so that you're feeding all the bacterias of good bacteria, all the families of good bacteria. Next, Mrs. Patient, buy 10, 15 apples, organic, of course. Wash them. Don't peel them. Cut the seeds out, chop them up, put them in a pot with water so that the apples are about 1/3 the height of the water. Add a little cinnamon. Turn it on high. In 15 minutes, you have applesauce. That's how easy it is. And you have a tablespoon or more every day of homemade applesauce. The commercial stuff doesn't work. Why? Applesauce, the pectin in applesauce is why you've heard an apple a day keeps the doctor away. This is why. Apples, the pectin in apples increase the level of arguably the most important enzyme in your gut called intestinal alkaline phosphatase, IAP. What IAP does is it protects the good bacteria. It attacks the bad bacteria. It reduces the exhaust of the bad bacteria that make you sick, called LPS. It encourages the good guys to colonize, to grab onto the walls of the intestine and form colonies of good bacteria. There are many, many benefits to IAP, and you increase your IAP by having a little pectin every day from fresh made applesauce, and have your kids help you make it. That way they're sharing in preparing food. They're learning that they can make applesauce and it tastes really good. Next, the rainbow diet. Always include multiple colors of fruits and vegetables in your diet, mostly vegetables. Fruits, great to have some fruit, but none of our ancestors ate fruit all year long. It wasn't available. So fruit usually is in the fall when the trees and the bushes mature and they have fruit. So our ancestors would eat lots of fruit, and what does lots of fruit do? It puts fat on so that they're ready for the winter. But when we eat fruit all year long, it's a curveball. It disrupts our blood sugar balance if we eat too much fruit. So don't go overboard on the fruit. Yes, there's many reasons why it's good for you, but until you have really stable blood sugar, and that's one of the things we talk about in another episode, is how to tell and how to keep your blood sugar as the temperature gauge on the dashboard of your body. You know, you always look at the temperature. Okay, the engine's not too hot. Okay. And your blood sugar is a temperature gauge in terms of your selection of foods. Are you balanced in your selection of foods? So we're talking about all those types of things and much, much more in the event.
Brilliant. I'm wondering where next to go, Dr. Brian. I'm more than happy if there's things that you would like to touch on. I know within the series there's a part on sort of the mindset ultimately as well.
Oh, yes.
And at some point in our podcast, I would love to hear you just talk maybe a little bit around that. But is there anything that you would like to cover before we touch
Well,
on?
let's do that. Let's do that. It was shocking when Dr. Jeff Bland, the founder of Functional Medicine, a brilliant, brilliant man and my mentor and friend, you know, it was shocking when he told us that a negative thought that we have is just as powerful at activating inflammation, activating your immune system, as exposure to the SARS-CoV-2 virus.
Wow.
What? You know, and Jeff Bland does not exaggerate. I mean, he's got science for everything he says, study after study after study. And we don't recognize how important mindset is in our lives until you realize that you've been overly stressed and you haven't felt well. Oh, wow, you know, I've been really burning the midnight oil for the last couple of weeks. Or, oh, you know, this person I've been hanging out with at work, I just don't like that person. And now my body doesn't feel good. You know, you start to associate the environment around you with the thinking that we're doing and how your body functions. Very, very powerful to recognize that it's worth the effort. And we have a couple of brilliant psychologists and psychiatrists talking about how do we begin to tweak our mindset a little bit? How do we even begin to do that? You know, because I am who I am, and I think the way I think is the way, you know, I grew up in Detroit. And so I grew up with muscle cars in Detroit. So I'm kind of a hard guy in my wiring. You know, I'm much softer now, but and for some people, my thoughts are my thoughts, nothing I can do about it. No, that's not true. And there are simple exercises that we can do that really are profound. I'll give you one of them from Dr. Pedram Shojai, the urban monk. This guy is a Buddhist monk, ordained Buddhist monk. And he talked about this in one of his books. And in our interview, he said, you know, set the alarm on your watch for every hour. And when the alarm goes off, no matter what you're doing, just take 5 deep breaths where you count to 4 on the inhale, on the exhale, pause for a count of 4. Then in, just like that, 5 deep breaths. It'll take you less than 1 minute. You're driving your car, take 5 deep breaths. You're working on research on the computer, take 5 deep breaths. Maybe put your fingers down for a minute off the keys and just take 5 deep breaths. You're in a conversation with someone, just quietly take 5 deep. Doesn't matter. Everybody can do this. And when you do that, and then an hour later, the alarm goes off again, take 5 deep breaths. Just do it for 1 day. Give me 1 day of your life and take 5 deep breaths. Notice how you feel. All of a sudden, the day's got a different hue. It's a little brighter. You know, yeah, it's a nice day. You know, you find that your vision of the world, your outlook on the world is different than it was in the morning. And that's a simple exercise that you can do. And we've got a number of exercises like that that just start to change you from living in what's called the sympathetic dominant immune nervous system. Your sympathetic nervous system is the fight, flight, or fright that most of us live in all day, every day. And when you take 5 deep breaths, you're just calming down your body. Your heart rate slows down. Your breathing begins to be a little slower and deeper. Your muscles relax a little bit. Your life starts to change on a subtle level. And then you'll realize, oh, I turned the alarm off 20 minutes ago. I forgot to do it. Okay, I'll do it now. And then you do, and when you do a little thing like that, or here's another one from Dr. Silva Dvorak, brilliant, brilliant psychologist. She said, when you wake up in the morning, even before you open your eyes and you're coming to awareness, think of 3 things that you're grateful for. Before your day begins, just lay there. And for me this morning, it was my son who was laying beside us in bed. He sleeps with us. And my wife, I'm so glad to have this partner that puts up with me and my quirks, right? And looking forward to the day today and some things that I'm doing, like this interview. So I just thought of 3 things, and then I opened my eyes. You know, really easy to do that type of thing, very difficult to remember. But when you do this on a more regular than not basis, your life starts to change. You think differently. You arrest the development of the fight, flight, or fright stress hormone response. Nobody heals when they're in sympathetic dominance. It's impossible to heal. Your entire operating manual is on survival mode, not healing mode. And so that's what happens when you begin developing these little nuances. Take 5 deep breaths. What are 3 things you're grateful for? I think I'm going to go for a walk today. Hey guys, instead of going to the bar, let's go to the gym, right? Hey, instead of watching that television show, let's take the dogs for a walk. You start thinking differently, and your body starts functioning differently. And in 6 months, you see someone that you haven't seen for a while, you say, wow, what happened to you? You look so great. You look younger. And well, I'm down 2 belt notches on my belt. I've lost a little bit of weight. Yeah, because, I found out that I was sensitive to gluten and dairy, so I took them out of my life. And I got glass storage containers in the kitchen instead of the plastic ones. And I don't use that standard nail polish anymore. I found organic nail polish, and I take 5 deep breaths every waking hour as often as I can remember. And your friend just looks at you like, what? But you've changed your life. You've changed the dynamic of your life. And that's our goal, is to give you the information to reduce your inflammation. So because your body always wants to heal and be healthier. Your body always wants to produce healthier, younger cells. It's just the environment, called the epigenetics, around your genes, around your cells that are reproducing. The environment's a fight, flight, or fright environment. You're not going to heal. You're not going to regenerate healthier cells. It's physiologically not the priority. The priority is fight for your life. That's the stress response that most of us live our lives in. And so you do all these little baby steps. Base hits win the ball game. All the little things you do that make the difference.
Yeah, I love that. And I think it's worth reiterating what you said there around just give me a day, because there might be people listening who are just, some of those strategies are so simple. And, we've said on the podcast, and you would have said this before, Dr. O'Brien, it's often the simple things that are the most powerful things ultimately. But I think when we're stuck, when we are struggling a bit, when we are in that kind of, let's say, chronic fight or flight, I think there can be resistance to the idea that simple things work. So I just want to reiterate that idea of, if you've felt resistance listening to what you've just shared, like that's probably a sign that actually we really need to kind of bring these strategies, interventions into our day.
Yeah, for those of you that felt resistance to this, I think whatever word you might use, I think most of us would agree that enlightenment is a worthy goal in our lives. It may not be a reality for most of us, but if you thought about it, yeah, man, like, enlightenment. Well, the word enlightenment means lighten up. Just lighten up. Meaning, well, I can't do that. What you can't take 5 deep breaths? Well, it's not going to make a difference in my rheumatoid arthritis. It's not. Yes, it is. Just read the science. Yes, it is. It's the accumulation of all the little things that make the difference. And what the scientists say, and their language is, you can arrest the development of chronic inflammatory diseases. You can arrest it. You can reverse diabetes. You can put into remission rheumatoid arthritis or multiple sclerosis or lupus. You can put them into remission. You don't heal from a diagnosed disease. You put the disease into remission. Well, how do I do that? By changing your lifestyle that caused the problem. Stop throwing petrol on the fire. Now, when you put your rheumatoid arthritis into remission, and now you're going for a 2-mile walk every day and you don't have any pain, where before you were using a crutch because you were in so much pain, now you're walking 2 miles a day. Go back to the old lifestyle and you'll be back with your cane before you know it. So you don't heal and get rid of your vulnerabilities, you put them in remission. And as long as you continue the lifestyle, the anti-inflammatory lifestyle, your diseases stay in remission.
Mm.
This is the most powerful drug that you could ever get, because there's no side effects to this. And it works. Every time it works. You just have to be comprehensive enough to identify, where is the petrol on the fire coming from? Is it food? Is it mold? Is it toxic thoughts? Is it heavy metals? Is it accumulated chemicals? Every newborn child in America today has at least 180 chemicals in the umbilical cord blood at birth that aren't supposed to be there. Mothers are as toxic as can be with chemicals that have been accumulating in their body over the years. And that's what baby is developing in this toxic soup in the womb. Excuse me, but it's toxic soup. And when you read the science, a baby's brain development is compromised because mom is high in phthalates, the chemicals used to mold plastic found in nail polish and plastic water bottles and soft contact lenses and credit card receipts and all these things. And you learn about, wow, it's overwhelming. But you take 1 hour a week and you deal with one thing a week. And in 6 months, boom, you've got this. You've completely turned around the lifestyle.
Mm. Yeah, I was looking at some of that research recently around sort of environmental toxins and exposure in the umbilical cord, and it's scary. But I just want to go back before I forget, Dr. O'Brien, to the breathing, and you gave the example of someone with rheumatoid arthritis kind of saying it's not going to work for their rheumatoid arthritis, and you quite rightly said that it will. And I think another reason why I think it can be helpful is just I always ask myself, what is the message I'm giving myself through this behavior, through this act? And I think the act of taking control of your breath for 5 breaths every hour, every day, it's a message, a sign that you have autonomy, like you have agency over your health and your body and how you're reacting. So I think, again, there's even a mindset component to this sometimes as well.
You're absolutely right. Absolutely right to that. And I don't think anything is more important than the mindset. You just have to be, our operating principle is progress, not perfection.
Yeah.
That's the principle. And so many of us think that we have to be perfect. Well, give that up. That's not going to happen. We're all going to make mistakes. We're all going to fall down and make mistakes in our plan. But you just pick yourself up and you start moving again. And you just keep doing your best. That's all you can do, is your best. And if you lighten up with yourself, if you have an enlightened attitude about what you're doing, 1 hour a week, all right, I'm going to learn 1 hour a week, I'm going to learn something new. And you just keep approaching it that way, in 6 months, that is 24 new things you've done. You've got organic nail polish. You've got glass storage containers in the kitchen. Every room of your house has house plants now. And people walk in and say, oh, nice house. You know, you just feel different in a house that's well oxygenated. You've learned about water filtration systems and air filtration systems for your home, for you and your family. You know, every little step you've learned about the chemicals, the Scotchgard chemicals on your furniture to prevent stains that outgas into the air, and the flame retardant chemicals in your sheets and your blankets and your sleeping clothes that outgas into the air for years. You can wash them 100 times, they still outgas chemicals into the air, minute amounts of chemicals, and you're breathing those chemicals. And then you learn about organic sheets and cotton organic blankets, and you learn about organic clothing, and you start making a change, and you learn about dry cleaners that are using non-toxic chemicals instead of the toxic ones. And you keep doing all these little baby steps, 1 hour a week. And in 6 months, boom, you've got that. And people go, whoa, wow, you look so great. Wow. Wow. And it's the validation of all of this work you've done. The hard work, the only thing that's hard in all of this, the only thing that's hard is make sure you don't listen to your brain saying no. That's it. Everything else is easy if you have patience and you work for progress, not perfection.
Yeah.
It's not difficult. You just have to not pay attention to, you know, for those who remember the television show, The Muppets, there were these two old men up in the balcony, Waldorf and Statler, and they were curmudgeons. They were always curmudgeons. Our brains are curmudgeons. Our brains, for almost all of us, are constantly giving us the, I can't do this. That doesn't make any sense. That's not going to stop my rheumatoid arthritis. I mean, that's what we're up against. And if you can listen to it and listen to what your thoughts are and laugh, you got it. You're there. When you can laugh at the silly thoughts that your brain says, no, that's not possible. No. Just watch the people in the inflammation equation who reversed their multiple sclerosis. Their MRIs showed 8 lesions on their brain, and they were in a wheelchair. 2 years later, they have 2 lesions left in their brain, and they have no symptoms whatsoever. And you say, what? And they look great. They look like $1 million. Or the ones with rheumatoid who were in wheelchairs and couldn't walk. Now they're walking 2 miles a day and no pain. What? What? The only obstacle you have to successfully arresting your chronic disease is listening to the curmudgeon in your brain. That's the only obstacle. Everything else is just pure science and easy to implement over time. I've never said that before, but it's really true. It's very,
That's going to
very
be
true.
the highlight, I think, of this interview just there, Dr. Brian.
That's right.
But no, I think it's such an important point to make. And I actually, about 4 years ago, probably, I spoke to Dr. Chris Germer, who researches self-compassion. And I shared a little story with him, reading his material and really focusing on practicing compassion. I was in the supermarket one day and I became much more aware of my inner dialogue. And I just laughed out loud at one of the things that I said to myself. And what you just shared there about laughing about your inner dialogue was like, yes.
Yes, yes. You know, a really nice exercise for everyone when you're driving your car on the tollway or the expressway, if you have to go through a toll booth and you have to pay the attendant, pay for the car behind you and drive away. And just drive away. And you can only imagine when their car pulls up and the agent says, "Oh no, the person in front of you paid for you." What? What? what kind of an impact will you have on a person, it's a really nice exercise to do
That's beautiful.
because you've just put a little sunshine into someone's life. And as a result, you have a little more sunshine emanating out of you. Some of the resistance, some of the blocks have let down for a while, and we have a little of that. Do you know the difference between excitement and enthusiasm? Excitement is kind of like the old cars where you had to crank the engine to get it going. Excitement is you have to rev yourself up. Okay, team, here we go. Let's go. Rah, rah, rah. Let's go do it today. That's excitement. Enthusiasm comes from the Greek word enthos, which means the God within.
Huh.
So when you live out of enthusiasm, sometimes, you're on and you're lots of energy, like I'm on right now, but it's coming from what is inside of me. That's my heart song to the world, right? That's enthusiasm. And the more you allow your own enthusiasm to come out in your life, the happier you are, the healthier you are, the more wonderful the world around you takes care of you. I mean, it's a different way of being. And it all starts, I've never thought of this before, but I'm going to emphasize it now in the event. It all starts with avoiding listening to that curmudgeon inside. Oh, I can't do that. Oh, that's just nonsense. That's not going to help my rheumatoid. That's just nonsense. But we've all, I think all of us have grown up with that as a dominant mode of thinking, because the world is sometimes a really difficult place and there's lots of not nice people in the world. But that doesn't mean that you have to be not nice with the people that you love and you interact with, right? So the first thing is take care of yourself. You're no good to anyone if you're not good to yourself. Take care of yourself. Listen to that curmudgeon and laugh. Really? Oh, that's a silly thought. Oh, man. Just listen and laugh. And then work on progress, not perfection, and you will arrest the development of your chronic inflammatory disease.
Beautiful. And that's it. I think there's an urgency in the Western world these days. Everyone wants to heal instantly. They want the quick fix. And I think we're all very guilty of that in our own kind of way. But I think that is such an important message from today. You're 1 hour a week for 6 months and you'll have transformed an awful lot.
Yes, exactly right.
Dr. O'Brien, thank you so much for coming back on the show. It's always an absolute pleasure to hear you and your love song, I think is what you called it. So I'm looking forward to the series. And yes, thank you very much.
Thank you, Alex. And the website for people is www.theinflammationequation.com/Alex.
Perfect.
Thank you
Excellent.
so much.
I'll put that into the show notes so everyone will have easy access. I'll mention it at the beginning as well so people can find it easily. And hopefully we will speak again soon, Dr. O'Brien.
Thank you.